And we do know that meeting between former President Mwai Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga also caused a stir and raised lots of questions about what the former premier is up to. This being the latest important meeting with the key leader. Political commentators say Odinga's plans will be revealed in due time, but are not ruling out the 2022 succession as part of his big plans. Take a look.
It all started here with two leaders once bitterly at odds, now in step and locked in a friendly grip. Their men telling little of what behind the scenes went into the change of heart. The two leaders embody the deep rifts in Kenyan politics, and their peace pact was received with relief. Held up as a start in healing a deeply fractured country wounded by the alienating election of 2017. Since then, the former Prime Minister has clocked his round of important political meetings. Those close to them have only shared an abridged version of what transpired.
All this, I think, they are efforts to get their opinions on what they think needs to be done in order to address the challenges that Kenyans are facing. But not only to get their opinion, but also to get their buy-in, because as very influential leaders, they need also to give their own directions on what needs to be done.
The surprise truce may have silenced the country, but not quite the curiosity about their endgame. While political commentators acquiesce that the meetings are in part about accepting the president's and the former prime minister's shared vision for the country, there could be much more to them.
If it was just a simple thing like those kind of things Raila read at the steps of Harambee House, devolution, corruption, inclusivity, etc., etc., they would have told us the thing. But the fact that they're taking quite a while to let us know what this deal is all about would then mean either we are reading too much into nothing, it was just a handshake, and they're just going to talk about devolution, and Raila could just do any peripheral thing, or indeed there's something, but that's something so big, they are finding it difficult to put it on the table, to put it in the public domain. I'll go with the second possibility.
Talk of 2022 succession politics is rife, the former premier being framed as the right successor to President Uhuru Kenyatta, taking the place of Deputy President William Ruto.
It's quite possible that Uhuru has come to the realization that if you want peace in this country, you must bring Raila on board. You must bring the two most political communities in this country that are represented by the two most prominent families in this country together. And that what better way to do that than perhaps to give Raila a chance at the presidency.
I have no evidence to say that Raila's collaboration with Uhuru Kenyatta, President Uhuru Kenyatta, is about either disrupting plans that have already been laid down in terms of a coalition that will go forth to take the presidency in 2022. But they feel as also people can read. I've seen Deputy President having sent messages out there saying that there must be something. This is not about a coalition government.
The Deputy President and his lieutenants have expressed their indisposition to the goings-on, the emptiness of what they say is just political gland-handing.
Ati tubadilishe katiba ndio wadosi wapate. My friends, mimi nataka niwaambie mchana mapema, ile ushirikiano tunatafuta Kenya sio kwa manufaa ya wadosi, ni kwa manufaa ya wananchi milioni 45.
The president will make a major announcement in his State of the Nation address to Parliament on the 2nd of May. It's expected to be an appraisal to the country of how much post-handshake progress has been made. Shila Sendeo, NTV.
And of course, over the weekend also, Boni Khalwale took a swipe at Prime Minister Raila Odinga, saying that because of you, there are a lot of unanswered questions. We want the respect we have given you, Honorable Prime Minister. Respect begets respect. Just listen in on what he had to say.
Because of you, Mheshimiwa Prime Minister, there are a lot of unanswered questions. We want the respect we have given you, Mheshimiwa Prime Minister. Respect begets respect. Sisi tumekataa kwamba never again shall Luya leaders divide our people.
Wenzako sasa wakati huo wanasalimiana. Hata wewe toka usalimiane na wenzako. Mimi nimeona nasoma gazeti kila asubuhi ni salamu. Kila asubuhi ni salamu. Nikiangalia kusema Bandaid salamu zake anasalamia. Kwani wewe huna mkono? Toka nje usalimie watu.
Ule mjadala wa watu kusema kwamba NASA imevunjika, wajue kwamba kuna process, na hiyo process hakuna yeyote ambaye ameandika barua kusema kwamba anajiondoa kwa NASA.
Mpaka sisi tutafute mbinu ya kusuluhisha mzozo ambao tuko naye kisiasa. Na siasa sio kifua peke yake, mpaka tutumie vile akili. Kama sivyo, sasa wewe Khalwale ulikuwa unalala na baba yako ameenda kuwinda na amerudi na nyama. Wewe unasema baba, mbona huko niambia unakwenda kuwinda? Ungesema bana umemleta nini? Sema tena mbona wewe unaenda kuongea huko na unasalimia na huko na mimi usikijua. Baba amerudi na vitu. Hebu msalimie na Uhuru. Salimia na Nyayo. Salimia na Kibaki. Salimia na Kalonzo. Salimia na wale watu wetu hawa. Hakuna haja mimi kuzaliwa nao. Kalonzo na Mtalia na Wetani wote hao. Nasalimia na wale wote ambao tulikuwa tunapigana.
Khalwale, your reaction from the Right Honorable Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister.
Well, we were in the same function, so really there would be nothing much to add. But when I said that there are a lot of questions that are unanswered, I didn't have time to say what those questions are. For example, it remains unanswered why Chris Msando had to die. It remains unanswered why Miguna had to be deported. It remains unanswered why 34 of our youth lost their lives. It remains unanswered the fate of the NASA coalition agreement. It remains Debarl unanswered the role of political dynasties in this country at the election of 2022. And the political dynasties I'm talking about is the family of Moi, the family of Mzee Kenyatta, the family of Jaramogi, and the family of Kibaki. So when we see all of a sudden the former Prime Minister moving from one dynasty to another one, our worst fears, and it's quite a big number of Kenyans who might be sharing these fears, is that there might be an attempt to perpetuate these dynasties in the leadership of this country. Why? Because the vibes we see are that there is an attempt to prop Gideon Moi. There's nothing wrong in Gideon Moi becoming president, but if Gideon Moi must become president, he must not be forced on Kenyans with a coalition between Raila, Kibaki, Uhuru, and of course, who is and Moi himself, the father. This, we must fight it, and we are going to bring it to a stop. There is no law in this country that provides that the leadership of the country should be shared with these four families. We want to ensure that as Uhuru goes away at the end of his term, that will mark the end of the Kenyatta dynasty, at least for now. Now that Raila has been locked out from our side by the NASA coalition agreement, that again, that marks the end of the Jaramogi dynasty, and that Moi and the Kibaki dynasties will also go. We want to see a new person emerge. I am very happy with what Ruto is doing. He's putting up a fight, proving that anybody, including sons of unknown people like Wamatangi, sons of younger brewers like myself, can also rise and lead this country. That is the discussion we want to have. And by the way, it is captured in the Bible. The Bible provides that all men are beautifully made in the likeness of God, and they are all created equal. And therefore, nobody should ever think they can use the wealth that they have gotten by dint of leading this country to intimidate the rest of us Kenyans. This, I believe in it, and I'll pursue it beyond that speech you saw over the weekend.
Right, but don't you think then your question of the unanswered questions about this particular handshake is a bit premature? Because they're still constituting a team. They have not even revealed the team. We're eagerly waiting to see if Raila will do that and talk about the handshake also in the devolution conference tomorrow. You've gone at least way ahead of yourself in trying to trip, off your tongue these particular statements before we know what the team will tackle, what they will look at as well, what will be, the program, or what they will have actually been the itemized issues that they will actually look into. One being maybe also the issues that you're raising here. So was it a bit premature from your own estimation?
It is not premature at all. It is very timely for the simple reason that they are not talking about personal property or personal interests. They are talking about issues that affect 47 million Kenyans. And if that is the case, then any such a discussion should be all-inclusive. It should attract stakeholders from all the areas and all the regions and all the communities that comprise what's called Kenya. It is nothing new, because when we had the national discussion on independence in Lancaster, everybody was brought on board. When we had the discussion in 1991 to introduce multi-party democracy, something for which many people paid, including Kenneth Matiba, it was bipartisan. When we had discussions of 1997 on the inter-parties parliamentary group, and that gave us minimum constitutional reforms that allowed us to go to a credible election in 2002, those talks were all inclusive. Then when we had the talks that brought peace after the post-election violence, that gave us the National Accord, which gave birth to the Grand Coalition government, it was an all-inclusive discussion. So what is this one that wants to take place between Raila and Uhuru and Kenyans? Poor us, we are being told, don't raise your voice. Say nothing, because the two leaders have spoken. We will continue talking because Okello and Wamatangi, you're the ones here who might be strange to some of us. We didn't start yesterday. We went into this national conversation when I was 22 years old as a student leader at the University of Nairobi. And we have kept the faith up to now. So our vision is very clear, nothing personal.
All right, so what is this particular favor that you are asking Right Honorable Raila Odinga to return to Luhya's after the handshake?
They have not played the full clip, but we are not asking for a favor. When I said respect begets respect, yes, I went on and told him that it is laughable that he would be contemplating supporting Gideon Moi. I used those words because the lawyers who have stood with him for the last 3 elections have done so purely because of respect. And I added that unlike Gideon Moi's father, who jailed him for 8 years.
Right. Okay, why can't you also put Khalwale to task when he talks about this particular handshake? Can you ask him what information is he privy to that we do not know about the handshake?
Well, Luala is my friend, dating back centuries, so to speak. But I think you're right, Debarl, to say that he could be jumping the gun in a way.
No, start with the question of the handshake, then we go to the jumping the gun, right? He's mentioned about the handshake. Are you privy to any handshake that he is talking about?
Well, I only know about the handshake. Yes, I only know about the handshake. You know, we have had a flurry of high-octane handshakes since March the 9th, when, you know, Prime Minister Raila Odinga met Uhuru Kenyatta in Harambee House.
Yes.
And first things first, we are coming from a very divisive electoral process, divisive to the extent that 400 lives were lost between August the 8th and the days preceding the handshake. 400 lives is not a small figure. It's not a small number. By the way, if we were where we were in 2007, yes, these are, you know, the reasons as to why we ended up at the ICC. And I think even 400 lives have the potential to send suspects to ICC to answer to these very egregious charges. But, you know, having lost 400 lives, you ask yourself, even as NASA coalition, what did we gain as a result? 400 lives had been lost and were still counting. But you know, in my village, I've attended certain funerals, Debarl, where long-distant relatives cried the loudest. Over 400 of those lives, 3/4 of them, and you know, I'm just using a very low figure, are coming from Luo Nyanza. You know, a very conservative 3/4 number.
Post-election violence?
Post-election violence from the August the 8th. Over those 400 lives from Luo Nyanza. Of course, some of them come from, you know, western part of Kenya and other parts of this country. So we bear the biggest brand as a community. And when peace is restored in this country, therefore, in retrospect, we then become the biggest beneficiaries. Otherwise, we would have lost many more. So when Raila Odinga, in his wisdom, steps back to reflect and retool, and, you know, say that, you know, life is so sacrosanct that we are not going to allow the police, the rogue police, to continue killing our innocent people. When we are brothers and sisters living in one country, there is nothing illegal and nothing extraneous and extraordinary to reach out to your political rivals. Nelson Mandela, I mean, a man that we are going to quote for centuries to come, reached out to his biggest adversaries and in fact made Frederick de Klerk his deputy president or vice president at a time when the apartheid system had really muzzled the black South Africans, and people never fathomed that, you know, that was going to happen, but it did happen. So when then Raila Odinga reaches out to Uhuru Kenyatta after a very divisive election in the best interest of the nation, because since then many things have happened, things that perhaps are going unnoticed. One is that peace has fully been restored and no life has since been lost apart from the flood menace that is, you know, ravaging the nation. Number two is that on economic front, this country has taken a rapid flight towards economic progress. Many people had lost jobs, many businesses had been closed, investor confidence had been fully eroded, but here we are today, enjoying the fruits that come with cohesion and brotherhood and friendship. So these are things that we are not going to sweep under the carpet just because during this flurry of meetings, certain individuals have not been carried along into the meeting. But it is important to also mention that we are still at a very tender age of what is encompassed or empaneled within this particular handshake. I think by the end of this week, they're going to now empanel the 7-member advisory team that will be chaired by both Paul Mwangi Wakili and Ambassador Kimani. This advisory team has not even been unveiled. We don't even know who is there. And perhaps Boni Khalwale is representing interests of foreign. I don't know. So jumping the gun and you know, parading blame games when we ought to be patient and wait, and therefore punch holes on the success or failure of this particular handshake.
Thank you.
So I think my brother, the man whom I respect very much, is jumping the gun. Let's wait, my brother. Just be patient a little bit.
Okay, let's say from Dr. Eseli as well. You think Boni Khalwale is jumping the gun despite the fact that you come from, you cut from the same cloth as far as Ford Kenya is concerned?
Not really. What I would tell my friend Okello is we should try to detribalize our politics, because the fact that the majority of the casualties were the Luo was simply because Raila was the flag bearer who was perceived to have been snatched his victory. I can assure you, if Kalonzo had been the person, or Weta or Moda the person, then you would have seen more Kamba casualties, more Luya casualties. That's a sad thing about our tribalized politics, and I don't think we should really harp on it. And the other thing is, the handshake should not be used as an avenue to intimidate those who might have doubts about it because they don't understand it. It should not be used as an intimidation tool, because it is being used as an intimidation tool. That if anybody tries to say, hey, and what is in it? He's told, wait, you know, you are not there, you are not fighting. Like I heard the former Prime Minister telling Khalwale that he was asleep when he had gone to hunt. You know, let's not use the handshake as an intimidation tool. But after saying that, if this handshake is about Kenyans' well-being, then it's time it was put on the table as fast as possible, because it's taking long, and the longer it takes, speculation creeps in. As you've seen, even the Deputy President appears to be wary of that handshake when he talks about not being for the constitutional review and things like that. Although, of course, he would not take my advice, because I'm on the side that he doesn't belong to. But otherwise, if I were to advise him, I would tell him, if I were him, I would keep quiet, because as the dynasties regroup, then the Kenyan might give him the sympathy vote that he's actually fighting against the dynasties. And actually, Kenya is where it is because of the dynasties. We could have been further ahead without the dynasties. So if I were William Ruto, I would go slow, I would keep quiet and wait for the sympathy vote that Kenyans will definitely perhaps give him if the dynasties gang up against him. Hopefully not. But if that's the intention of the dynasties, that would be a very sad day for Kenya. But the handshake itself threatens to ignite the same animosities and the same feelings of exclusion that it's meant to cure, because of what is the controversies that are going around. Because the longer it stays without being put on the table, it seems to be generating the same feelings of exclusion in some sections of the society, the same sort of animosities, like what you saw the exchange at that funeral in Kakamega. So I think it's important that if there is something good in that handshake for these Kenyans, it's put on the table as fast as possible. Whoever is supposed to sit down and dialogue should be doing it on behalf of Kenyans, and whoever will be selected in that group should do it on behalf of Kenyans, not on behalf of any individuals, for the sake of the country. If it means constitutional review, whatever it takes to make the country a better place to live in, and to ensure that we put the country on the right road, so that we don't have this ethnic exclusion and things like those that have bedeviled this country for so long. I think it's important. The sooner it's done, the better for everybody. The better even for those who did the handshake, because right now there are too many handshakes until they're diluting the original handshake. So I think it's before we get into more handshakes, I think it's important that we get the ball rolling, so that Kenyans can actually have something to look forward to.
Thank you.
Because having peace does not mean the cause of the problem has been removed. The cause was negative ethnicity, the cause was feelings of exclusivity, feelings of exclusion, and many other things. So they have not been removed yet. The peace, I would say, is an uneasy peace, which doesn't really qualify to be called peace until we sit down and iron these issues. So the longer we go on, these issues just continue simmering underground, and eventually they'll explode again. So the earlier it's done, the better for the country.
All right, so let's say from Kimani Wamatangi, as we always say, so is it maybe a Bandaid solution that we still have? Issues are still simmering, undercurrents are still there, but they have not been dealt with decisively.
Yeah, Debarl, I think, in my opinion, to my mind, I would argue that as a country, if we used the handshake and as my colleague here, Mwai Eseli, says, if then we were to also reflect on what is now the handshake fever that has caught on, I would say we've made progress and market progress, and I would base my argument on this. One, if you look at what happened in 2007 and 2008 then, and let's all remember that actually what then culminated in 2007, 2008 was a handshake between then Kibaki and Raila Odinga. But before that handshake of 2008, we had to have Kofi Annan in this country. We had to have the US government here in this country. We had to have a whole 12-member team comprising of both sides of ODM then and PNU, sitting in Serena, spending billions of shillings. We had to have the president of Tanzania and the former president, including the Ghanaian leader who was here, and a lot of talk. That is when we were able to only get those two leaders to talk, get a written document then and sign it, and then shake hands. And after that, the country cooled. So that is what it took for a 2007-2008 handshake. Now, fast forward to 2017 and 2018, and we have almost a similar scenario when the country is again in a political limbo, stagnation, facing headwinds politically, and it needs to take the two again to give a resolution or show a way forward. Because one, we have to agree about a few things, Debarl. You see, the weight which we have applied behind our political leaders nowadays, you could fairly argue, it's almost like cultism. Such that once Raila Odinga says that this is the way things are going to be, even in NASA, forget ODM and the Luo community. Actually, the way it was in NASA, that is the way it's going to be. And so, it requires his presence and physical handshake to be seen as symbolically for people to know that peace has been ushered in. And so, when the two leaders again now, on their own volition, without having to invite all these international players and everybody and all the, camaraderie. Then you have them agreeing and they shake hands and we have peace. And let's ask ourselves, I was somewhere in a function over the weekend and my bishop reminded me something very interesting. That after that handshake, what happened to the money markets? In fact, I had forgotten. There was excitement. I mean, the trading in securities and everything rose up. Because that tells you what was the country feeling, what were Kenyans going through. And so, as much as we may want to look for all other either benefits or solutions, or even want to argue that what are the coming benefits or what was the benefit of the handshake, one thing that is clear to even the lowest cadre of Kenyan, the most pedestrian of us, is that at least some goodwill, at least potential political agreement, at least lower temperatures in running the country socially have been achieved. And so people now can plan, can think, and again, cohesiveness. We can say now, we can see if our leaders can do that, what can't we do? And so I know there's a lot of expectations, as I say those words. I know there are lots of expectations, but also let's not forget the role of political pundits. There are many people who want to either, make all manner of comments on any action. But I believe on this one we were right. Lastly, it's on what you said about that clip that was played there on the deputy president. I want to believe that when the deputy president was saying those words, it was in a different context. It was in a different event. It was not in reaction to the handshake. And I want to be clear on this one because I've watched the deputy president doing his campaigns all the way from 2007 and 2008, even earlier. And I do not think that he is expecting as a person to be a beneficiary of sympathy votes.
That man works. He campaigns.
All right.
He does his things.
We'll look at that.
And though all those other factors may be playing around, one thing that I know is that also in his mind he's clear that he has to work, deliver, and prove to Kenyans that he's worth the cut.
Thank you. Let's hear from Boni Khalwale.
Just a small correction, because we have a lot of young people who are watching this program now who might think that the facts stated by Honorable Okello are true. My brother, you can't use this program to rewrite the history of this country. To come here and say that the deaths that came out of the 2007 post-election violence were around 400, of which 3/4 were Luos.
2017 is what I said, not 2007, 2017. Last year's elections.
400?
Yeah, over 400 lives.
Oh, okay.
The other one was over 1,500.
I thought you were talking about 2007.
Oh, no.
2007, I wanted to correct it, but if you
That
have your
was over
facts right,
1,500, yeah.
I haven't confirmed the facts of who died. Whether it is 400 or less or more.
Drop by my office this afternoon.
I'm here to confirm. Please continue.
Well, I want to put something into perspective. People have misunderstood the litany of handshakes to mean perpetuation of dynasties. One important aspect of what is going around us is that even as Uhuru Kenyatta and Right Honorable Raila Odinga would want to steer this country forward, they would want also to benefit from certain experiences that have been gained by our leaders of the past. These are critical people who you are not going to ignore just because people may fear that, we want to, continue with a Moism or Kibakism or something of the sort. President Moi was the leader of this country for 24 years, sitting at the helm of governance. Before then, he was vice president for well over 9 years. The experiences that he gained during all this period are still relevant to today's dispensation. And that is why you are not going to ignore Moi. President Mwai Kibaki was just president the other day. Uhuru Kenyatta just took over from him. But one thing that every Kenyan would remember is that life totally changed during the Grand Coalition government. Something that has always gone unnoticed, and perhaps my brother Wamatangi is aware about this, is that Kenya was able to service all its debts during the Grand Coalition government to zero. And then the country began on a new slate. So what President Kibaki did with Raila Odinga during that Grand Coalition government and the relevance of what they did towards today's political scene going forward is still very, very relevant. And therefore, we will not then say that we are trying to resuscitate or bring back issues of dynasty at the expense of Kenyans moving forward. No, these are critical people within this country. They are our leaders, they are our elders, and we have to benefit greatly from the experiences that they've gained over a long period of time. Now, my brother Boni talked about certain issues that have remained unresolved. He talked about deportation, he talked about wanton killings, and many other things. But it is important to note that in the Agenda 9, or the 9-point agenda that these two leaders have put forward, is, safety and security of Kenyans. And when you talk about safety and you talk about security, then it also brings about, wanton killings by the police and other groups, talk about issues of illegal deportation of Kenyan sons and daughters. And it happened to my constituent, Dr. Miguna. It can happen to anybody else. And even as the handshakes will be taking shape, these are critical issues that must be brought back. Because again, we are not going to enjoy the benefits of the handshake when one of our own is languishing abroad. These are matters that we have to talk about very openly. They have to be rectified so that the country can move forward.
Now
as
you're
one.
talking.
You talk about ethnic antagonism. We talked about, you know, ethnic profiling. These are issues that we have to talk about.
Thank you.
Let's incorporate inclusivity, which is a very key element, an integral part of the 9-point agenda. So no one should then assume that we have moved forward, all those things are swept under the carpet. And by the way, another critical component of all this is the recomposition of IEBC. And naturally, it is, you know, taking shape even with,
right, I think
before Boni Khalwale engages the bulls.
Right, I don't want to